The 1980s produced some of the most beloved cult movies in history. But not every low-budget failure became a midnight movie legend. Some films collapsed so completely that irony could not rescue them. These are not misunderstood classics. These are endurance tests. Broken stories, lifeless performances, and creative decisions so misguided they drain all enjoyment. Tonight, we revisit the movies that never earned redemption. Number 14. The Swarm, 1978. By the time audiences encountered The Swarm on late-night television in the 1980s, its reputation was already radioactive. Directed by Irwin Allen, the master of disaster cinema, this film should have been thrilling. Instead, it became one of the most exhausting spectacles ever assembled. Killer bees swarm across Texas, causing panic destruction and death, yet the film never generates suspense. Scenes drag endlessly filled with stiff dialogue and characters who exist only to react slowly to obvious danger. What makes The Swarm especially painful is its scale. The cast is enormous, filled with legendary actors who appear confused, bored, or completely disengaged. The film jumps from location to location without urgency, building nothing resembling momentum. Even moments meant to shock, such as mass deaths or environmental collapse, feel strangely hollow. There is no tension, only noise. Unlike entertaining disaster failures, The Swarm never tips into absurd fun. It takes itself with deadly seriousness while delivering visual effects that already looked outdated during its release. Long stretches involve people standing around explaining bee behavior while the audience waits for something to happen. When action finally arrives, it is brief, chaotic, and emotionally empty. The Swarm fails because it misunderstands spectacle. Bigger does not mean better, and louder does not mean thrilling. What remains is a bloated, overlong film that mistakes repetition for escalation. Number 13. Howard the Duck, 1986. Howard the Duck is often remembered as a strange footnote in blockbuster history. But revisiting it reveals a deeper problem. This is not a bold experiment gone wrong. It is a film that never decides what it wants to be. Part comedy, part superhero story, part romance, part science fiction parody. It collapses under the weight of its own confusion. The central issue is tone. The movie presents a cartoon duck in a realistic world yet refuses to fully commit to comedy. Jokes fall flat because the film constantly pulls back into seriousness. Action scenes feel awkward because the character design limits movement and expression. Emotional beats feel inappropriate because the audience cannot reconcile the premise with the attempted sincerity. The pacing is another major failure. Scenes stretch far beyond their usefulness, lingering on awkward interactions and uninspired set pieces. Instead of embracing absurdity, the film seems embarrassed by it. That hesitation kills any chance of cult appeal. Truly bad cult films lean into excess. Howard the Duck retreats from it. Even visually, the film struggles. Effects that were meant to impress now feel uncanny and unpleasant. The duck costume never feels alive enough to carry the story, yet dominates every frame. Number 12. Troll 2, 1990. Troll 2 is often defended as the ultimate so bad it is good experience. But that reputation is built on clips, not on full viewings. Sitting through the entire film is an entirely different experience. What begins as awkward fun quickly becomes tedious, repetitive, and genuinely unpleasant. The film is riddled with technical failures from wooden performances to incoherent editing. Dialogue is delivered with unnatural pauses, and emotional beats land nowhere. Scenes repeat the same information over and over, as if the film is stalling for time. The infamous moments that circulate online are surrounded by long stretches of nothing. Unlike enjoyable cult disasters, Troll 2 lacks pacing instincts. There is no rhythm to its madness. It lingers far too long on domestic scenes that go nowhere. Characters behave irrationally without generating comedy or tension. The horror elements are toothless, and the fantasy elements are incoherent. What ultimately kills Troll 2 is its monotony. Once the novelty fades, there is nothing left to hold attention. The film mistakes incompetence for creativity and assumes confusion equals charm. It does not. Troll 2 survives as a meme, not as a movie. Outside of selective moments, it is a chore, Not all failures deserve resurrection, and this is one that works far better as legend than as experience. Number 11. Jaws: The Revenge, 1987. By the time Jaws: The Revenge arrived, the franchise was already wounded. This final chapter did not limp to the finish line. It collapsed completely. The premise alone signals disaster. A shark seeks personal vengeance against a single family across vast distances. The film presents this idea with absolute seriousness and expects the audience to follow without resistance. From the opening scenes, the pacing is lifeless. Suspense is replaced by repetition. Characters stare at water. Music swells without purpose. The shark appears rarely, and when it does, the effects are weak even by the standards of the era. Instead of fear, the film inspires confusion. The rules of reality bend without explanation, yet the tone remains solemn. What truly drains the experience is the absence of energy. Action scenes feel muted and strangely distant. Emotional moments are undercut by stiff performances and hollow dialogue. The film wants to be tragic, but never earns that weight. It wants to be thrilling, but never builds tension. Unlike enjoyable franchise failures, this movie refuses self-awareness. There is no sense of fun or excess. It trudges forward, convinced of its own importance. Number 10. Mac and Me, 1988. Mac and Me is often remembered as an imitation of a beloved science fiction classic. That comparison flatters it. This film is not inspired, it is engineered. Every scene feels assembled to sell something rather than tell something. The result is a movie without heart rhythm or sincerity. The story follows an alien befriending a human family. That should be fertile ground for wonder. Instead, the film moves mechanically from one product display to another. Emotional beats are rushed, then abandoned. Character development is non-existent. Scenes exist only to transition to the next advertisement. Pacing is another fatal flaw. The film drags despite its simple story. Long stretches are filled with awkward silence or forced sentiment. When action occurs, it lacks impact or clarity. The alien character is not charming or expressive enough to carry the narrative. The costume limits movement and emotion, leaving the center of the film lifeless. Attempts at humor fail because the film never commits to comedy. Attempts at drama fail because nothing feels earned. Even moments meant to inspire warmth feel calculated. The audience is not invited to believe in this world, only to observe it. Number 9. Superman 4. The Quest for Peace, 1987. Superman 4 represents the collapse of a cinematic icon through neglect and confusion. Budget cuts are visible in every frame. Effects look unfinished. Sets feel sparse. Action sequences lack scale or imagination. What should feel mythic feels small. The story attempts to tackle global politics and nuclear fear, but reduces these ideas to simplistic gestures. The message is blunt, yet ineffective. Characters speak in slogans rather than emotions. The villain feels more like a concept than a threat. Conflict dissolves without consequence. Worse than the visuals is the pacing. Scenes unfold slowly without tension. Conversations replace action. Exposition replaces drama. The film rarely trusts silence or spectacle. Instead, it explains itself endlessly while offering little to watch. This is not a fun misfire. It is a joyless one. There is no camp energy to latch onto. No wild excess, no memorable absurdity, just a steady erosion of interest. The tragedy is not that Superman looks weak. It is that the film feels indifferent to him. Number 8. Red Sonja, 1985. Red Sonja is often mislabeled as camp fun, but sitting through the entire film reveals a much harsher truth. This is not energetic pulp or wild fantasy excess. It is a slow, joyless slog disguised as a sword and sorcery epic. From its opening moments, the film struggles to create momentum. Scenes unfold without urgency, and action sequences feel strangely restrained. The central character is written without complexity or growth. Motivation remains static, and emotional stakes never deepen. Instead of heroic struggle, the film offers repetition. Battles lack choreography, and danger feels theoretical rather than immediate. Even moments meant to empower the lead character feel oddly muted. Production design promises adventure, but rarely delivers it. Sets appear large, yet empty. Costumes hint at myth but lack texture or personality. The world never feels alive. It feels staged. Supporting characters drift in and out without purpose, serving only to move the plot forward mechanically. The greatest failure of Red Sonja is tone. It takes itself seriously while offering little substance. There is no self-awareness to create camp pleasure and no craftsmanship to create immersion. Number 7. Leonard Part 6, 1987. Leonard Part 6 feels less like a movie and more like an unfinished sketch stretched far beyond its limits. Built around a thin joke and a celebrity vanity premise, the film never discovers a reason to exist. From the start, the narrative is unfocused, drifting from gag to gag without escalation. The plot centers on animal-themed villains and a reluctant hero, yet none of these ideas are explored creatively. Scenes are stitched together loosely with little continuity. Characters behave randomly without generating surprise or humor. Attempts at satire fall flat because the film never sharpens its point. Visually, the film is bland. Action sequences lack tension or clarity. Comedy scenes lack timing. Music cues appear misplaced as if the film cannot decide how it wants the audience to feel. The tone shifts without warning, leaving viewers disconnected. The pacing is especially punishing. Scenes linger long after their purpose has passed. Jokes are repeated instead of developed. The film seems afraid to end, yet unwilling to build toward anything meaningful. What destroys any chance of ironic enjoyment is the absence of commitment. Truly bad cult films go too far. Leonard Part 6 never goes anywhere. It hesitates, it stalls, it circles the same weak ideas until exhaustion sets in. Number 6. Ishtar, 1987. Ishtar carries a legendary reputation for disaster, yet watching it reveals a subtler problem. This is not chaotic nonsense. It is something far more damaging. It is empty. The film moves slowly, weighed down by self-importance and indecision. The story follows two aspiring performers entangled in international intrigue. On paper, the concept suggests absurd comedy. On screen, the execution is lifeless. Scenes drag without punchlines. Musical numbers feel awkward rather than funny. Silence replaces rhythm. The characters lack chemistry despite constant interaction. Dialogue circles endlessly without progression. Jokes arrive late and land softly. The film expects charm to carry it, but never earns that charm. Direction is another issue. Wide desert landscapes create distance rather than scope. The setting never becomes part of the comedy or danger. Instead, it amplifies the emptiness. Long walks replace action. Explanations replace momentum. What makes Ishtar so difficult to endure is its refusal to collapse into madness. It remains restrained and cautious at all times. It never embraces failure or absurdity. Number 5. Bolero, 1984. Bolero is not remembered for story character or cinematic craft. It is remembered for repetition, endless repetition. Framed as a romantic drama set against exotic locations, the film mistakes sensuality for substance and confidence for depth. What unfolds instead is a slow-motion collapse where scenes repeat the same emotional beat without development. The narrative follows a young woman discovering herself through obsession and desire, yet the film offers no psychological insight. Character motivation never evolves. Every encounter plays out identically with slightly different lighting. Dialogue is sparse, and when it appears, it explains nothing. Silence dominates, but not in a meaningful way. It simply fills time. Direction leans heavily on soft focus imagery and lingering shots that quickly lose impact. What might have felt provocative instead feels inert. The camera gazes endlessly, but never discovers perspective. There is no tension, no build, no payoff. Just the same visual language used over and over. Pacing is the final blow. Scenes stretch far beyond necessity. Transitions feel arbitrary. The film moves without momentum, drifting from location to location as if unsure where it is headed. Even moments meant to shock feel muted by repetition. Number 4. The Garbage Pail Kids Movie, 1987. The Garbage Pail Kids movie commits its greatest sin immediately. It misunderstands why its source material worked at all. The original cards thrived on shock speed and irreverence. The film replaces that with sluggish pacing and forced sentiment. From the opening moments, the visual assault is overwhelming, yet not in a fun way. The character designs are grotesque without charm. Their movements are stiff and unpleasant. Instead of quick, anarchic jokes, the film lingers on scenes that go nowhere. Humor is replaced with noise. The story barely exists. Events happen without logic or progression. Characters appear and disappear without consequence. The film seems unsure who its audience is. It aims for children yet traffics in ugliness and cruelty. It gestures toward rebellion but never commits to satire. Pacing remains relentlessly slow. Scenes drag as if padded to reach runtime. Musical numbers interrupt without energy. Emotional beats are inserted mechanically without setup. The film feels assembled rather than written. What prevents ironic enjoyment is the tone. It is not wild enough to be outrageous and not sharp enough to be clever. It simply trudges forward, confident that chaos alone is enough. It is not. And number 3, Hobgoblins, 1988. Hobgoblins is often compared to successful creature comedies, but that comparison only highlights its emptiness. The film borrows ideas without understanding why they worked. What remains is a collection of weak scenes stitched together without rhythm or invention. The creatures themselves lack personality or menace. Their designs are cheap, but not creatively cheap. They move awkwardly without intention. Instead of building suspense, the film relies on repetition. Characters wander into danger, then escape, then repeat the process without variation. Dialogue is painfully thin. Characters speak in cliches without chemistry. Attempts at humor fall flat because timing is non-existent. Jokes are telegraphed far in advance, then delivered without punch. Silence fills the gaps. The pacing is especially punishing. Scenes stretch endlessly while nothing happens. Long conversations add no insight. Action scenes lack escalation. The film mistakes length for development. Unlike cult favorites, Hobgoblins never embraces excess. It never goes too far. It plays everything safe while failing at every basic level. That safety kills potential enjoyment. Number 2, Howling. To Your Sister is a Werewolf, 1985. Howling 2 arrives carrying the promise of excess, yet somehow drains every ounce of energy from its own premise. Werewolves, occult rituals, and European nightclubs should create chaos. Instead, the film unfolds with astonishing lethargy. It mistakes repetition for atmosphere and provocation for story. From the opening scenes, the structure feels loose and unfocused. Characters wander from location to location without urgency. Exposition replaces tension. Scenes begin and end without purpose. The narrative never builds momentum and never clarifies stakes. It simply drifts. The most infamous element of the film is its recycled footage. Climactic moments are replayed repeatedly as if padding runtime through insistence rather than creativity. What might have been shocking becomes numbing. The film seems aware of its own emptiness and attempts to compensate by showing the same images again and again. Performances range from disengaged to bewildered. Dialogue is delivered stiffly with little emotional connection. Characters rarely react in believable ways. Horror moments lack suspense because the film refuses to slow down when needed and refuses to accelerate when it matters. Number 1, Monster A Go-Go, 1980. Monster A Go-Go barely qualifies as a finished film, yet it circulated widely during the 1980s, earning a reputation that far exceeds its content. This is not incompetence elevated to art. It is absence disguised as cinema. The premise suggests a giant radioactive monster loose in the countryside. The film delivers none of that. The monster rarely appears. When it does, the footage is unrelated, mismatched, and incoherent. Scenes feel stitched together from different projects without continuity. Most of the runtime is spent with characters discussing events that never happen on screen. Dialogue circles endlessly repeating the same information. There is no escalation, no revelation, no climax. The film simply stops. Technical quality is abysmal, even by low-budget standards. Sound drifts in and out. Editing ignores cause and effect. Scenes begin abruptly and end without resolution. It feels less like watching a movie and more like watching fragments of one. Monster. A Go-Go is not memorably bad, it is barely present. Watching it feels like time slipping away without purpose. It is the ultimate proof that not all failures deserve rediscovery. Some should remain forgotten. The 1980s gave us legendary cult disasters, but not every failure earned redemption. These films did not collapse with style or chaos. They simply collapsed. No charm, no energy, no reason to revisit them. If you survive this list, you have earned your cult movie scars.